Hi, this is Praios and I'm a professional gambler. Today we will talk about poker theory, 1 minus alpha, another video which we will discuss from the genius Phil Galfond. I mean, he's probably not a genius, but a great poker player. And yeah, thanks for letting us use this video. To be honest, I never heard of this theory, but we will adjust on the go and I will give you my thoughts about this. Let's get into it with
If you've heard pros talk poker strategy, you may have come across the phrase 1 minus alpha. Today I'm going to talk about what that means. So basically, people use 1 minus alpha to figure out, it's a math formula, a pretty simple one, to figure out how often, in theory, you need to defend against a bet or a raise. What happens is, if you don't defend enough against a bet or a raise, you're incentivized.
Oh, okay, I heard of it, just not under this name. So it's minimum defense frequency.
Your opponent to bluff with every hand that cannot win otherwise. And you become then exploitable to that play. So the way that the math works, alpha stands for the bet size that your opponent makes divided by the pot after the bet size is added to it. So for example, if the pot is $100, your opponent bets $50. Alpha is their $50 bet over their $50 bet plus the $100 pot, which is 50 over 150, which is 0.33, 1/3. So 1 minus alpha.
Okay, explained well. So, but I think there should be somewhere on the screen should be the formula because it's hard to follow it while hearing it. But yeah, that's the minimum defense frequency. So you should defend at least 33% to not be exploitable in this case. Is this correct?
Alpha then is 1 minus 1/3 equals 2/3. That means you have to defend 2/3 of.
Oh, he's right. Yeah, I got it wrong. He has it right. Yeah, 33% sounded also not enough because, yeah, it's obvious because if you bet 50 to win 100 and you are faced with a pot of 150, and if you gave it up that easily, defending 33% is obviously way too less. So yeah, he's right with his math and I'm wrong. So that happens when you get not prepared into a stream at all.
The time to make them indifferent to bluffing. I guess that's another poker term that you may have come across. What you're trying to do theoretically in poker is to force indifference onto your opponents, which I guess sounds kind of funny when you say. But in their strategy, you're trying to force indifference so that they don't have the opportunity to exploit you by, say, underbluffing or overbluffing. To illustrate the concept, I'm going to use a pretty simple toy game. It's called. I'm using a lot of what are these called? Using a lot of buzzwords. So a toy game is a simple game that we set up that illustrates a certain mechanic or strategy much easier than the full complex game of No Limit Hold'em, Pot Limit Omaha across multiple streets.
I think this might go in the wrong direction, but I already got an idea how I can explain this to you. But let's see what he comes up with,
etc. So the toy game is a classic one called the Ace King Queen game. You and I are playing against each other. I get dealt a king, and you get dealt an ace or a queen. You get dealt each one half the time. So there's a deck with whatever 4 aces and 4 queens. It's shuffled. One of them goes to you, and then I just hold on to the king of hearts. Now there's $100 in the pot, and we have $100 in our stacks. The question now is, what is your strategy and what is my strategy? So if you were to check, well, this is the simplest one first. If you were to check to me, my strategy is to never bet, because You always know whether you have the best hand or not, and I never know whether I have the best hand or not. So if I bet, I'm never getting called by a queen because you know you lose, and I'm always getting called or raised by an ace. So my strategy is simple. If check two, I just check. Now, your strategy is a little bit trickier. First of all, you know that I'm checking, so there's no check raising because check raising an ace doesn't do anything for you because I'm never going to bet. So you know that if you want to get value from your ace, if you want to make money, you have to bet it, and so therefore you have to bet all of your aces because there's no benefit to checking an ace. You have an ace half the time, bet it every time. How much do you want to bet with your ace? You want to bet as much as you possibly can, which in this case is your stack, $100. So your strategy, the first component of your strategy is you're going to go all in with every time you have an ace. Now, let's say when you have a queen, you decide, you know what, I have the worst hand. I don't want to do anything. I just want to check. What happens then is you go all in with an ace every time, you check a queen every time, and I can exploit you by folding every single time. You make nothing. You just win the $100 pot. Now, I guess a quick aside that in these toy games and in poker in general, when we're speaking about in theory, each side knows the other side's strategy because we're trying to determine the theoretically optimal strategy. And the theoretically optimal strategy is very roughly defined as, a strategy which cannot be improved upon in expected value under the assumption that your opponent is employing the best counter strategy that they can. So probably the technical definition is a little bit different than that, but you get the idea.
He's actually not explaining it very well. So I guess what he's trying to say is that an equilibrium is reached so that no player wants to divide from his chosen strategy. Then, I mean, it's sort of like this. If you know what the other player does, do you want to do something else to improve your V? And then the other player at some point sees, okay, he does that, and I can exploit this strategy by doing that. And at some point, they come to a strategy where both players don't want to adjust anymore. And this is the equilibrium, and that's the optimal strategy given the game for both players. And there's not always an equilibrium, but I mean, it can be that some player always does X and sometimes does Y, or there so it can be, I think it is called in English, a mixed strategy, that you sometimes do this, sometimes do that, and it can also be pure strategy, it might be called, so that you always do the same thing. And this can be true for both, or it can be a mixed strategy that you sometimes do that and sometimes do this. So sometimes bluff, sometimes don't bluff. This is a mixed strategy, and you do it with certain frequencies. And if you want to bet every single time, then it's not a mixed strategy, then it's a pure strategy that you always want to apply. For example, if you have the nuts, you always want to bet. If you're in position and this is a last bet that can go in.
So I know your strategy. So that means if you,
I'm also not sure if I've explained it any better than Phil, but maybe you can combine the two things and hopefully you get something out of it.
You can't go all in with your ace every time and then check your queen every time. You also can't go all in with your ace every time and go all in with your queen every time, because yes, you leave me guessing, but it's actually not much guesswork, because I know that half the time that you go all in, you have an ace. Half the time you go all in, you have a queen. I have to call $100, so I lose $100 if you have the ace. But if you have a queen, I win your $100 bet, and I win the $100 pot. So I win $200. So then my counter strategy is to call every time. Pretty simple. The formula for figuring out how often you need to bluff, it's actually, for some reason, there's not like a buzzword for it that I'm aware of, but it's also pretty simple. I have 2-to-1 odds when you bet $100 into $100. So in order to make me indifferent, you need to have 2 value bets for every 1 bluff. So if you have an ace twice and you have a queen once, when you go all in, now when I call, I'm gonna lose $100 2 times out of 3. I'm gonna win $200 1 time out of 3. So I'm gonna break even. So that's the indifference you're trying to force. So your strategy is go all in with your ace every time, go all in with your queen half the time. That's your optimal strategy. What's my optimal strategy? My optimal strategy is where we employ 1 minus alpha. So you're risking $100 to try to win this $100 pot. So alpha is your $100 over the $100 pot plus your $100 bet. So 100 over 200 is 1/2. So 1 minus 1/2 is also 1/2. I have to call half of my range. So I have to call half the time with my king. So whatever, I can flip a coin, assuming it's a fair coin. And now we've completely solved this toy game.
Yeah, that's the equilibrium I was talking about. So no one wants to divide from his strategy, but they could also apply different strategies first, but they will learn and adjust all the time until they at some point reach equilibrium. And I think got a better example that's more easy to guess if you are not that good in math. So I don't know if you know this already, but I'm also a great painter and an artist. So you probably can later buy this as an NFT. So you do this one. So this is a we play no soccer anymore. No poker anymore. We play soccer this time, and let's say one guy is the goalkeeper, and the other guy tries to score a goal. And for simplicity's sake, he can only choose 2 options: either shoot right or left. So 1 and 2, these are his 2 options. So what now is the optimal strategy from both guys? So let's say the goalkeeper always jumps to his left. It's to the deuce. Then you always want to shoot to your left and the right from the goalkeeper, because you would win the game every single time. And yeah, this logic also applies if let's say he jumps right 60% and left 40%, then you always want to shoot to his left, because you will score a goal 60% of the time. Is this correct? At least you will score a goal more often than not. And if he now uses a strategy where he jumps 50% to each side, now the guy who is shooting the penalty is also indifferent if he shoots right or left, because it doesn't matter. He has no perfect response anymore, and this would be the equilibrium for this game. So yeah, let me know if you want to buy this thing here. I think the starting offer would be 1 Ethereum. I will also save it. But let's PNG. Goalkeeper, we call it. Okay, I can't save it for some reason. Let's save it on the desktop. So comment if you are interested in this nice painting. And yeah, let's move on with Phil's logic.
We have purely optimal strategy for this game for both opponents. Now in poker, the game is much more complex. There are so many more hands that each of us can have. There's also the component or element that when you're betting the river, sometimes you're going to bet hands, bet your ace, bet a value betting hand that actually loses, because sometimes I can also get dealt an ace in the real game. So things change a lot, and we're not going to go into each and every way that changes things, but understanding the understanding the core of game theory helps you navigate these spots. And in almost all cases, definitely not all, but in almost all cases, 1 minus alpha is still going to apply, or something very close to it. So anytime that you're playing and you feel like you're getting run over, you feel like you're guessing, you can't read your opponent, I would urge you to try to think about how often you have, different types of hands, and then try to call with, if they're betting $100 into $100, try to call with half of those hands. Or if it makes you more comfortable, because you can't figure those out. I mean, we're all at different stages in our poker game. If you just have no idea how often how often you have top pair, how often you have second pair, how often you have ace high, whatever the case may be, you do know when you have a hand that only beats bluffs. So now there's not going to be, you don't want to say like, okay, you bet 100 into 100. If I have a bluff catcher, I flip a coin in my head and I call half the time, fold half the time, because sometimes you do have hands that beat bluffs. So then you'll be overcalling if you call half your hands that only beat bluffs and all of your hands that do beat bluffs. But depending on the spot, maybe flip a coin in your head, and call a third of your hands that beat bluffs against a pot bet.
I think you can do this with randomizers. You don't need to flip a coin in your head. Or you can make an Excel sheet, and this could give you a random number, let's say between 1 and 100. And then you, for example, say or determine before you see the answer how many percentage you want to call. And yeah, if this ends up, let's say you want to call 30%. So if the number ends up to be 1 until 30, then you will call. And if it's higher than that, you will fold. By the way, the minimum, I mean, it's a complicated topic. It's hard to explain it well, but I think it's always better to do it when people can see what you are actually doing. I will zoom a bit. So the pot is, let's say, 100. We've tried to build a formula live, so I hope I will not make too many mistakes. And the bet is also 100. And yeah, now you want to 1 minus alpha, or the minimum defense frequency. Try to find this out, and this would be, so it is, we have to call 100 in order to win 100. To put brackets here. This sounds about right. So against the pot size bet, your minimum defense frequency should be 50%. So you should defend 50% or more, because then your opponent is yeah. So, but because this is because if you defend less than 50%, your opponent would make an auto profit by betting. And yeah, we could also change some parameters. Let's say he bets only half the pot, so 50. Then we need to defend 66% of the time. So that's why you also call so often against small bets. So if he bets like 1/10 of the pot, you have to call 91% of the time, as you can see here. So yeah, it's also, I think it helps a lot if you know some of these numbers by heart. I mean, you don't need to be able to do the math at the table, but you should know some things. So for example, if he bets full pot, how much do I need to defend approximately? So against full pot, you need to defend half your hands. Against 3/4, you need to defend a bit more than 50% against half pot. You need to defend 66% of the time. You could also just remember the full pot and the half pot bet, and then if someone bets something in between, you know it's something between 50 and 66%. And yeah, also it's also helpful to know what to do against very small bets. Yeah, so you need to defend 80% against a quarter pot bet. And yeah, if you only remember full pot, half pot, and so what is it? Full pot is this, half pot was this one, and this is quarter pot. So if someone bets something in between, you just know, okay, it's closer to 1, so it's like 0.55%, and if it's closer to half pot, then it's like 0.66%. So you can it's enough on the table if you know approximately what to do. Yeah, so I hope this was helpful and I was not rambling too much, talking complete bullshit. And you also saw the math behind it. So because if you just hear it and can't see it yourself, this is sometimes hard to follow.
Or something like that to get you somewhere close so that you know, look, maybe I don't know what my opponent's doing. I don't know their strategy. I don't know if they're bluffing all the time, if they're not bluffing enough, but I want to be comfortable knowing that they're not taking advantage of me. So I'm going to employ a strategy that can't really be taken advantage of in any material way. And I'm calling enough and folding enough as well. Now, of course, making hand reading and understanding things like that, this is like a fallback plan. This is kind of a worst case scenario where you want to protect yourself from being exploited, but you don't really, because you don't know where you're at. What people will actually do, I told you to flip a coin in your head. People, mostly professionals, actually do truly randomize. So when they're playing online, for example, they might have a random number generator up and say, okay, well, I know.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You could also have just a dice, and yeah, depending on how accurate you need it, you could have a dice with only 6 sides. You could also have a bigger dice with like 20 outcomes, and then you could, I mean, you probably don't need it more accurate than that. You could just use that if any software help is not allowed.
That I want to bet this hand 2/3 of the time. They click the random number generator, and if it's in the top third, then they check, and if it's in the bottom 2/3, then they bet, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good approach, because doing it this way assures that you really randomizing and not just clicking buttons and trying to get it right out of your head. And this usually also doesn't work.
And people do this live. They will either, so like a very simple way, which I think can open you up to some exploits, but is not really really.
Yeah, you can, I think you know what's coming now. He will say that you look at your watch, and based on some parameters, you decide to bet or not.
Likely, nobody's going to figure it out. Is you can say like, okay, well, if I want to bluff half the time, then I'm going to bluff when my higher card is on the left of my 2 hole cards, and then I'm going to check when it's on the right. And other people live will look at their watch, and you have 60 seconds on your watch, and so you can figure out, well, it's actually easier to divide it into 4 quadrants than do the actual seconds, and figure out, where the second hand is. That's going to randomize for you. So people will really do that. You can do that. I don't do it because the way that I play, I'm rarely falling back on this, and I'm not very concerned with theoretically optimal play compared to a lot of my peers. So I just try to make a read. But there will be times where I'm unsure. I don't want to get run over, or I don't want to be overcalling, and I just say, you know what, I need to call this sometimes, fold sometimes. I'm going to randomize in some. I actually don't really randomize. I've never randomized with a random number generator or in any other way, but I do base some calls on.
Me neither, by the way, but I think it's a very good approach. And if you want to be one of the absolute top guys and play really tough games or really tough competition, I think you have to do it.
I'm like, okay, I know that I'm in the top half of my range here, so I don't have any feeling of whether or not he's
I really am a bit surprised that he never did it, because he played some very tough guys in the Galfond challenge.
bluffing too much, so I'm just going to call because I'm in the top half of my range. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful, and even if not super helpful for your game, hopefully you can feel smarter talking about it to somebody else.
I liked it. Not sure if he explained it the best way possible. I'm also sure that I did not explain it the best way possible, but maybe you can combine the things we both said and get the maximum out of it. Yeah. Anyways, I'm also signing off. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, and if you definitely subscribe to all these good things, and if you think it's also helpful for other people, feel free to obviously feel free to share it. Yeah, thanks again for watching. Bye bye.